Hi, Theo.
Good evening, Anand.
Very nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
So today my guest is Teodor Gabriel Crainic. He is full professor of OR, Transportation and Logistics and holds the chair on Intelligent Logistics and Transportation Systems Planning in the School of Management at UQAM in Canada. He is also Adjunct Professor in the Department of Computer Science and OR at the Université de Montréal and Senior Scientist at CIRRELT, where he is Director of the Intelligent Transportation Systems Lab. Theo is a member of the Royal Society of Canada, and in 2006 he received the Merit Award of the Canadian OR Society. He co-founded two important conferences in the fields of transportation and logistics, namely TRISTAN and Odysseus. His main research interests are in network, integer, and combinatorial optimization, meta-heuristics, and parallel computing applied to the planning and management of complex systems. Theo published almost 300 scientific papers and chapters and has an impressive Age Index of 77 according to Google Scholar. He also supervised over 160 graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. Theo, it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for actually doing it. The community should actually be very thankful for building memories in a sense.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I think some people don't know this, but you're actually from Romania.
Yes, I was born in Romania a couple of months back. And in fact, I did live in Romania until I was 17 and a half, something like that. Born in the capital city and raised there and went to school there. And it was an interesting time in a sense. Politically speaking, I was living in a dictatorship country. It was a communist country, very harsh. It was bad before. It went worse after. I was in a kind of a little bliss period. So I didn't feel as much, but I knew because several in the family went to prison before, and my mother was worried that my father would go there as well. So we were in a sense in the informal opposition because there was no such thing at the time, and this is eventually what also was one of the reasons why I am in Canada.
Yeah, but how that influenced you when growing up?
Well, one, you learn quite early to shut up, especially learning that actually walls have ears and that you have to be careful and that your parents teach you that very, very early. You also, you have a little bit of a career kind of choices, and there is a little story about, my parents, like a kid, you just grow up and you want to be everything from, I don't know, a fireman to a cowboy to the president of the world. And then at one point around 8 years, so I think it was like the second grade, my father asked me one day again, what are you wanting now to become? And I say, well, I would like to be a diplomat and an international diplomacy and international law. And then my father looked at me and said, okay, but that for that you have to be a member of the Communist Party. And then he added to the smile, you better go science because you're very good in science, or continue in science. And fundamentally what I did, I was old enough to understand that that was not a very good. So in a sense, you have that.
So your family did not agree with the regime?
No, certainly not. And but again, I was sufficiently good at school. Actually, I was good in school that I was not really bothered. I mean, but you had a course of political science in a sense every year, and it was for a full year. So it was you feel it around, and actually you had to be part of the movement. If you are in the top 10%, they enrolled you automatically in the Young Pioneers or in that, into this. When the leader died, you were there to be. So you knew it. It was not innocence at all. And then as you grow older, you understand the hardships and the fact the penuries. I mean, what can you eat? And fundamentally, the whole family tries to find stuff for all the family. So, I mean, it was never the how would I say? It was not poverty, but it was a hard life on many sides.
Oh, and did your parents have higher education?
My parents, both of them, went to university. My mother, she was an artist actually. In course, she wrote a lot, and once she came to Canada, she actually started to paint what she wanted all her life. And but when she was very young, my grandfather told her, you can do whatever you like in life, but it was the end of the world. But you have to have a job, and you have to have something that you will carry you through all your life. So she actually went to the business school, and to have a statistics and a diploma in business. And she hated it all her life, but she made her a very good position for her until she came to Canada. My father went to the university as well. He's retired, but he was a geographer, and he worked. He was a job in an institute in the capital city, but he was lucky enough to be able to go in the countryside, supervise works, and meet the people. He loved it, and actually that was an extraordinary opportunity when we came here, because with the big works on the hydroelectric dams and centrals up in the north, he managed to actually take advantage of what he knew. And so yeah, I mean, I was out of university couple, but their parents had only primary, secondary school, something like that.
Okay. Your grandparents,
my grandparents, but they were of the generation that they understood the value of learning and of school, and they made immense sacrifice for their kids, my uncles and my parents, of course, but also my uncles and aunts, to go to school. And almost everybody went either to university or a very high technical school.
Well, that's great.
So that was important in the family, and we tried here to pass that to our kids. And I'm looking at them now, and they are happy, and I think they try to pass that to their own.
That's fantastic. Crainic is actually not your original surname, right?
No, Romania. It's it's a Latin country. It's a small Latin country, about 30 million, something like that, in Eastern Central Europe.
And Romanian is a Romance language, by the way.
It's a Roman language. It's close to Italian, close to French. With huge differences at the same time.
There are common words even in Portuguese.
So in a sense, we pronounce our own. Our language is easier. But it was also surrounded by many other, and a lot of countries around were Slavs. The Hungarians, Polish, Russians. Later on, the Turks came. So on my father's side, somewhere the family still has some of the deep roots in Poland. So on my grandfather was Kosowski, and in fact I still have my cousins which are called Kosowski. And now my father, who was at one point, and I don't remember how old, but I was old enough to understand what we were doing. He wanted to be even more Romanian by name, in a sense. So he selected, he brought us, and I remember he was talking with my mother, and they brought me in the conversation, even if I was very young. And this name, comes from the center of the country. It's one of the very, very old name in Romania there. And so Crainic I am. And
Yeah.
there are meanings and all kinds of things. But, like everybody else, I think everywhere, I'm living in an immigration country and region here in North America, a lot of immigrants from everywhere. But even in a country like Romania, where it's 80% maybe, or core Romanian in a sense, even in those so-called core Romanian, you do have all kinds of linkages. And if I'm looking at my family, and if you go a little bit up in the tree, I'm in the capital city, but my mother was born in the capital city, my father not, but he came there when he was 2 or 3 years old. And if you go on you start having roots around in all regions of the country. And yes, there is a huge part which is ethnic Romanian, if you want to call it like that, but I have a little bit of a Polish, I have a little bit of a Hungarian, and I don't know what else, because it didn't really look old. So I don't know, maybe that prepared me better for life here in North America, where fundamentally, that's
possibly.
I don't know. It's anyway. I'm very happy where I am.
Yeah, but still talking about your name, your first name Teodor does not have an H.
No, it doesn't.
But I noticed you write your nickname Theo. Everyone calls you Theo. With it. And what is the reason behind this convention?
Well, actually, it's a long story. Teodor, it's a very Romanian name, but it's also an Orthodox name in a sense. So you find it in Greece and in all the Slavic countries around, and it's also in the Western Europe. It's written a little bit different. So when I came here in Romania, has no H, has no E at the end, has no accent. It's a purest. When I got here and went through school, in French, you have an H, you have an accent on an E, and you have an E at the end. And so my name was written in about all sorts of. When I finished a PhD, in fact, I had to go and organize all the diplomas to have it
standardized.
However, when I was actually back from, and we maybe talk about that later, back from the postdoc and actually back at the CRT, we had our first mini computer. And so the first user names were created. And at the time, I mean, the young ones even don't know what it is. There was less memory than in my telephone now. And the words were short, so the username were short. So it was Mike in 4 letters, it was Diane, and they put Theo because it looked nicer with 4 letters, and it's top. So this is it. So it goes back to 84, something like that. They were calling me Theo when I was in university, so that's why. But it was not officially written any place. But once you start to have your username in computers, that's it. You don't change any longer. So it's it's a funny reason. So computers, that's computer science.
So you told me the other day that when you were about 8 years old, you had an eye accident and you went to Vienna for a surgery. What happened then?
Okay, that's also a long story. But so I had the accident, and well, they did what they can, and I had the first intervention in Romania. And the problem is, speaking about the regime, they did not have the technology and the tools to actually be able to do everything they wanted, or they knew that could be done. So the doctor, who was somebody very renowned in Romania, said the boy has to go out because there is an infection there and it cannot be treated. So, but it took time. So I arrived the first time in Vienna around 13, 14, something like that. Time flies. And I got I was actually 2 or 3 interventions. They stopped. I lost the eye was lost but they saved the other one. And about that time, maybe the next 3, but it was a time where, and I was with my mother there. It was the time when there was the Velvet Revolution in Prague, and actually the Russians, the communist Russians, the Soviet Union, invaded Czechoslovakia and Prague. And remember being with my mother in the tram and seeing people cry in the tramway. And actually, my mother, who was speaking a little bit of German, which unfortunately I don't, she learned about that. And people were afraid because actually the Russians had occupied Austria after the war, and they just, we were in the 60s, so they were not more than about 10 years since they had left.
How old were you?
About 14.
About 14, like okay, yeah.
13, 14, something like that. So 67. And so then it was, so my mother asked herself very deeply if she would actually ask for political asylum. My father was in Romania because we couldn't leave, the three of us, because the regime didn't want us to be too easy to fly. So, well, it's a long story. I mean, so we waited by touring a little bit in Italy. It was my first taste of Italy at the time. A little bit unconscious at the time, I mean, at the age I had. So my mother, seeing that actually the Russians didn't invade Romania as well, she decided to go back, because actually and I remember hearing her and my father kind of quarreling, why did you come back? Why didn't you stay out? So this was the next time when I had to go and for a verification exam and all that. My father managed to get first time the passport, and this is when actually it was 69 when he asked for political asylum in Italy. And again, some very strange decisions. Young brains who don't think everything, that was me. Because I kind of said to my father that, look, I mean, obviously you have to go, and obviously I have to return, because if I am there, I will be able to get out of my mother. If I am with you, she will never be able to get out. And I remember my father looking at me. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning in Vienna before going to Italy. And he looked at me, and he didn't say anything for a couple of minutes, and said, okay. I mean, if you feel it like that, and this is how we did it. And I was lucky. I mean, I was very lucky in my life. I am still very lucky in my life. And, it took like 2 years or something, 2 years and a half, in fact, but we did manage to get out.
Yeah, you guys left to Canada about 50 years ago or so, right?
71.
And 50,
beginning of 71.
Yeah, so 50 years. So you were forced to give up your Romanian citizenship in the process, right?
Yes.
So how did you feel?
I feel, well, there were mixed feelings. I was very happy to leave. For me, it was clear that I had to leave. My mind was made. I went back only to get out of there with my mother. At my age now, I would not do that. But when I was, at that age, I did. And we were, there was an international situation which helped. Like Canada was selling, Romania wanted to buy a nuclear reactor from Canada, and actually there was a family reunification in the CIRRELT treaty. But I wanted to leave. In order for us to get the permission to leave, we had to renounce the Romanian citizenship, my mother as well, by when you were submitting the paperwork. So you are living in the country by having asked not to be a citizen any longer. And actually, I have a paper from the National Assembly of Romania which stripped me of my Romanian citizenship. So now I could have it back, but I have to ask for it. And I don't want to ask for it. I didn't ask to lose it. They took it away. If they want me to have it, let they offer it, and I will take it, but I will not ask for it.
Oh.
I'm a little bit maybe too proud or something.
Okay.
My wife says that I am too orgullious. I don't
Yeah.
know a good English word, but
Right. Yeah, in Portuguese there's a word orgulhoso. It's
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my earliest memories of Romania is the national soccer team of 1994. I was a big fan of Gheorghe Hagi, and they did actually very well in that World Cup in the US. So it
did.
was one of the first times I really recall of hearing about Romania. We didn't have internet back then, so it was one way of getting to know the country. And then when moving to Canada, you joined secondary school, you went straight to college. How was it?
No, actually, I arrived in February. I arrived in mid-February, actually. And I was, compared to the school system over there, which is fundamentally the Western Europe system, 4-4-4, I was in the third year of the third cycle, which is in the Lyceum High School. And I was more or less through the halfway that third year. I was 1 year and a half left. And the way that our things organized here, I could have gone directly to what is college here in Quebec, which is a 2-year. But then, and again, I told you I'm lucky. The counselor in which, as a new immigrant, says, look, there are 4 or 5 months left until June. Yes, you have everything to go to the other one, but you just arrived, so you don't really know neither the country nor the system. If you go to secondary school, it's the last year. You have those 4 or 5 months. You know that in terms of academia, you don't have surprises, so there is no problem on that side. But you will know the system, and that's exactly what I did. And I was very lucky again because I went to a very good school here in Montreal. Like in any city where you have a lot of immigrants, you have neighborhoods of the new immigrants come and then go elsewhere. So I was in that neighborhood, but very nearby, it's a very high level, more township neighborhood, in fact. Mm-hmm. And that school was more or less on the border. So I went there. So I also met people of a very large social scale, in a sense, and I learned I started learning how Quebec and Canada and the Western world actually function at school, outside, and it was very, 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 very good. So that allowed me to actually start my high school fresh and do a full cycle, high school, undergrad, master, PhD, and then...
Yeah, you got yourself busy with judo and programming classes. And in fact, there was an interesting motivation for you to take programming classes, right?
Well, actually, there are several motivations to take programming classes. One is that somehow I discovered, I won't say discovered, I rediscovered, in a sense, science fiction literature, because when I was younger in Romania, in Romanian, I read already Jules Verne and Wells, translated in Romanian. Mm-hmm. So I was that kind of 19th century sci-fi. Mm-hmm. And then by chance, I ended up in French translations of some American classics. Actually, it was Van Gogh, the books are over just here, and Van Gogh and Clark and Asimov. This is what I started. Mm-hmm. So I was very much intrigued. And then in the same time, I discovered that elective courses, that for me it was, and for anybody who was coming from that type of school, totally new, because, you go to school in the beginning of the year, you got the list of courses, the list of professors, and you just go through them. And here, yes, they were compulsories. This is fine.
But you have the option to choose some.
Yeah, but then they are elective. What is that? So you have to discover first what it is. It was before website, so you went in a big room and you saw the names of the courses on the wall, and you tried to put it on your paper, and it was which is Introduction to Computer Programming. And okay, so I took it. So it was, I don't think that we even saw the computer actually. So you are programming, on paper, and then you gave it, and they were reading it, but I discovered computer science in a sense, on a very low level. And I remember talking with a colleague that we lost ourselves. We didn't meet after that, but saying, this is what we want to do. And I remember being, again, crazy and sending only one application to go to the university, because I discovered there is a computer science department in University of Montreal. And I only went there, which, again, retrospectively was totally crazy. But I was admitted. So this is how I ended up in a computer science department, where I discovered the operations research exists.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know about.
You mentioned some sci-fi books. You also are into sci-fi movies too.
Yes. Well, yeah. I'm a very old Star Trek fan and Star Wars fan, and I'm trying to keep my mind open, and from both what is called space opera, which fundamentally Van Gogh and Star Wars are, to the more convoluted author movies, and not only in sci-fi, by the way. I'm looking broadly, and I started after that to read fantasy as well. And yes, I'm a fan of Tolkien. And
that's what I was going to ask exactly that.
Coffee, and there are here a number of things, and Ferrer and some others.
That's very interesting. Yeah. But you were mentioning you have your first contact with OR during the undergrad. Do you remember the occasion?
Yes, actually, the computer science department, now we are talking 73 about, and it has been created about 10, 12 years before, at the end of the 60s. And it was, so they had those ideas. There were 4 groups in there: theoretical computer science, numerical analysis, numerical statistics, and operations research. And we were supposed to have, plus mathematics, and we have supposed to have a introduction to everything. And that was like the half of the undergrad first year and half of the secondary having that. So my first course was Introduction to Operations Research with Jean-Marc Rousseau, who later became my supervisor, master, and PhD. And this is where I discovered OR in general, modeling in particular, and then math prog as well, because you have actually to solve what you model. But and I finally, by the second year of my undergrad, kind of dawned on me that this is the field I want to work in for the rest of my life.
Right. So doing masters, it was very natural for you then.
After that, it was a natural. So I choose the even in undergrad, we were more on so at one point you split, so you were more in broadly OR and the numerical statistics, and then you go to the master, so you had a lot of OR and a little bit of statistics, and then you go to PhD. But I have a PhD in computer science with operations research specialty, because at the time this is how they were doing it.
But your research during the master's was very interesting.
During the master, I worked on airline crew scheduling, pilot crew scheduling. We did, should I say, ad hoc heuristic column generation.
Why not?
Yeah, missing totally what Martin Desrochers found, like 8 or 9 years after, which is the shortest path with resource constraints, which is the beautiful way to actually generate those columns nowadays. But so I worked on that at the master level. But then I switched for the PhD, and I worked on what is now anyway, service network design for planning, tactical planning of freight railroads. And I worked, the railroad was not really financing the project, so But we were meeting with them, and I had data from them, and they were very open, and they didn't use it at the end because at the time they were not ready to, and maybe we didn't know how to sell it at the time. But so this is how I moved to my PhD thesis on service network design.
I assume you're coding everything in Fortran back then?
We were in Fortran, yes. We coded in Fortran.
And
yes.
Coding optimization algorithms can be very tricky. You rely on your supervisor, colleagues, or you know how?
Well, I had the benefit of the Montreal setting and the fact that we were in the Center for Research for Transportation, and my supervisor at the time he had become the director. So somehow what we do we continue to do it. So even if we don't work necessarily in teams, we make sure that we have sufficient resources for our students to do well. So my supervisor at the time, and I have an idea how after that I learned exactly, but he had somebody who was a professional, and actually he to work with his students and with his own projects outside of that, because he was actually working later on. He opened Giro, the company, so they were working on that side, and a little bit of time to help the students. So my coding, for example, that professional did a good part of it, and I coded the core at one point, which was actually to take care of the nonlinear part of the model. So it was, if I remember correctly, a projected gradient method, something like that. So I coded that, and he coded around that, and what was in fact a math heuristic at the time. We didn't even have the name at the time. And just for example, that code, including with what I put in there, then helped another PhD student, Jacques, who is now a professor in HEC here. He did a PhD like 2 years and a half, almost 3, later than me, on the same topic, but more on tracking and more on the quantitative management part, more operations management part. So he took the model and the code and actually was able to do a very beautiful thesis. So the center was very helpful for us, and I think for the Montreal.
Yeah, so you had a very good environment that allowed you to develop and overcome any type.
We have professionals that we get together, and they are there, and we pay them in order the students to have access, and the equipment.
Yeah, that's excellent. You were pretty busy doing your PhD. For example, you were even involved with the creation of the Students' Union.
Well, somehow at the university level, there was that idea that to federate the various unions. And in the department and at the graduate level, there was no union. Now, I was a very good friend that you very well know, Michel Gendreau, and actually we were quite involved with the department, and at one point we were representing students without having any organizations, and on the department committee, and I was later on on the university, not council, but assembly. And then when we saw that movement in the university, I said, let's organize that. And so we organized a union, yes, a graduate student union. I was there for about 2 years and a half, until I was toward the end of the PhD, and I was on a certain number of bodies within the university. Michel was a little bit longer, but he stayed longer, and was younger. He's younger than I am, so he stayed longer.
Right.
But it was a very interesting period, and this is, I think, where we also got a couple of characteristics I think that both me and Michel have, which is, one, we acknowledge the value of the organization and the fact that as individuals we work for us, but we also have to work for the organization. And that came to us both from the CRT which is exactly that, and from the university and the union. And actually, yes, you represent the students, but it's not necessarily a fight, because the university has to prosper and to work. So that was on one side, and the other one is, we like managing, and we like getting mixed up in too many things. And that's why I became director. Michel became director. Then he became director of his own department later on. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe being involved with the union helped you to develop some skills and abilities.
But also the willingness to do it, and I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, it's both a duty and a pleasure in a sense, even if we don't like it every day. Yeah.
You finished your PhD around 1982.
Yes.
Your papers came a bit late, though, right?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think I was the last generation of, at least in Montreal, around here, where you do your thesis and then you write your papers. And so I started to write my papers while I was doing the postdoc, and I finished the thesis papers once I got back to Montreal, before I start doing something else. So I ended up publishing 3 papers out of the PhD. I even published 1 paper out of the master thesis, which like 6 years after that.
Wow.
I remember, both me, and not only me, but my colleagues and the professor which are around, nobody talked at the time that you should publish while you work. We start talking, and I remember that we were talking towards the end, and should we move to that? I think that in the States they had started to do that in certain places. And for example, we mentioned the Rocher Martin later on with his work on column generation, and he was one of the first to actually be paper-based. So you publish the papers and then you put together a thesis. So it was that epoch where So this is what happened. Nowadays, we train our students to publish as they work, and not everybody works at the same speed, but this is how we want to. How it is. The world today, this is how it is.
But in your opinion, what is more suitable?
It all depends how you supervise. I've seen so many theses where at the end you try to put it together into a thesis and to find, the storyline to bring everything together. So if you kind of have a topic and you decide the topic with a student and your colleagues from the beginning, this is a topic. And then if you start like that, quite naturally from the beginning, you see, especially with a little bit of experience, you see how that could be not partitioned, but actually taken in stride by decomposing, like you decompose a complex model in a sense. You decompose it into, that's something that we should look first, and that the second, knowing perfectly well that actually you'll do dynamic management as it advances, because new topics will rise and new questions, and actually you also see more what is best or more appropriate for the student, but you have that vision from the beginning. The problem is more when you start with a contract financing stuff, where you and I saw that in Europe a lot with the EU contracts, where the students start working on the contracts or the EU project that you have to deliver. Anyway, I don't want to get into those, but sometimes it's not necessarily the best planning. So planning is everything. Here in Montreal with us, it's a joke, because even it's a household joke here with my wife, because planning is everything. We did that all our life. We plan, but in a sense it is. So you look ahead and you look at the topic, and Okay, so even when you work in a partnership with a company, you look at the project and you have to protect your students from going consultants. So we go, this is bad. So you have to actually plan a little bit, and knowing that you'll change the plan as you go, but it's doable. So doing a thesis with 3 meta-heuristic for CVRP, yes, there are a lot of them. They are not very high in my scale.
Right. Yeah. After completing your PhD, you went for a couple of postdocs. The first one in Italy, the second one at MIT.
Right.
Then you came back
Yes.
to Montreal later.
I was very happy in MIT. I had friends, both new friends and, funnily enough, some people from Montreal that I knew, and were still friends with people that I met there. And I was going to stay another year, and then eventually I will, start looking around. And then I got a call from a professor of mine, not my supervisor, but Mike Florian, who happens to have been born in Romania too, but he left when he was 4. So so he speaks like three words of Romanian. His mother, who died unfortunately about 10 years ago,
Interesting.
yeah. But anyway, so he was my teacher on networks and networks flow, and he had a big project starting, international collaboration in Brazil. Brazil.
Nice.
And so he called me and he said, I need somebody young like you to assist and help both manage the project and do the research and the students who will be there. So it was an opportunity once in a lifetime. I told you I'm very lucky. And so I returned to Montreal as a researcher in the CRT. So that was 83. And that with this project, we went to Brazil. So I went to Brazil for about 10 years, at least once a year. We did beautiful work with colleagues there. We met people from the government, from the industry, and we worked with JPOT, which is an institute of the Ministry of Transportation of Brazil. We were PUC in Rio. That's a Catholic university of Rio de Janeiro. And with students, we created a software which after that was commercialized. So it was a beautiful period and a beautiful work and beautiful output. And then I got a chance about 85 to have a 1-year invitation as invited professor in UQAM. And in 86, they offered me a job, a tenure track job. And then again, it was very hard to say no, because at that time, we were out of the 80 recession, if everybody remembers or anybody remembers, and there were almost no hiring in operations research. In fact, here in Montreal, it created a whole generational hole in operations research. So I started as a professor in UQAM in the Department of Management and Business Administration. Actually, the name changed and everything.
Yeah, and after that, you started a collaboration.
To work on the Brazilian project. So while doing also work on service network design at the same time, and continue working on what becomes STAN, which is strategical planning of freight transportation at the national level.
Yeah, right. I'm very happy to know that you had this connection with Brazil. That's very nice. But after that, you started a collaboration with China in the early 90s.
Yes. And that is, again, I mean, luck has it. A good friend and a colleague. He's professor of geography, numerical geography, because he's very quantitative geography, I think it would be a better term, in University of Montreal. And he was a member of the CRT. And PhD in geography, University of Hong Kong. And he speaks Mandarin, a little bit for Cantonese, not much, but here, CIDAD.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he put together a very large project. He knew the people in Shanghai, and a very large project financed by the Canadian International Cooperative Agency, Cooperation Agency, with a university in Shanghai, university which is directed towards transportation. And the big project was create a center there, transfer knowledge, both managerial and scientific, equip them, train, have exchanges, do things together. So we created a research center, kind of a CRT type of research center. Even our management people, administrative officer, trained their officers there. We brought equipment, we brought software, we had students, we did a number of projects. And again, in the 90s, starting in 1990, and I went to China almost again, at least a year. Yeah, I was traveling a lot, I'm still traveling. At least once a year to China. So we saw China changing and Shanghai changing. There was no Pudong at the time. On the other side of the Huangpu River was a village. And now there is a mega city, and you have the magnetic train going there.
So you witnessed the transformation.
We witnessed the transformation, and we trained people. And there was the very hard epoch of the repression in China, the Tiananmen Square, when actually the Chinese, there is still a dictatorship in China, a very bloody one, and actually they quench the student movement, and many people died.
Yes.
And no students were allowed to leave any longer, and the ones who were there, they didn't want to go back.
Yeah, it was a very sad incident. Yeah,
that was. But with the colleagues and the professor, we continue, and somehow we continued our collaborations, and that was. That was a beautiful time as well.
That's great.
It's a beautiful. People are nice everywhere, and China is a beautiful country. Now you have a regime, and we all know what's happening now down there. So
you just mentioned CRT.
Yes.
You also became the director of CRT in the 90s, and for 8 years.
In 91, I took over the directorship of the CRT after Gilbert. So it was. The beginning of the 71, somebody who did a couple of months, and it was Mike Florian, then it was Jean-Marc Rousseau, then it was Gilbert, then it was me, then Michel, then Bernard.
Wow.
Now it's
sounds like a dream team.
Yeah, well, it's not a bad succession director there. I took over in 91, and the rules of the CRT. We are joking at the CRT that we have the same rules as the American Republic has, not more than 2 mandates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did my 8 years as a director of the CRT. And yes, we did a number of things during that time. We changed from pure University of Montreal towards more universities, and already Gilbert has worked, so the business school and Polytechnique has entered, and later on the other ones got after me, but we worked on them. That we moved to parallel computing, and we created a group of centers with the Center of Mathematics, with Gerard, and that with that we created the first network of high power computing in Quebec, and then which became later part of the Compute Canada network, and now there is a very big network. So it was a time of change. There was a time of financial hardships as well, because there were less money, and anyway, we had to do a number of management issues. So but science was also great, and it was the big China project, and towards the end, so we welcomed a lot of people. Towards the end of the 90s, this is when I started to go back to Italy and to renew my
connections.
Not my friendships, because the friendships were already there, but my scientific contacts and work. And this is where we, towards the end of the 90s, we started to work with city logistics.
Right. You mentioned your efforts on parallel computing. I think it's important to talk about your contributions in the use of parallel computing in OR. I suppose there were many challenges when you started working in this field. Can you comment about it?
Well, yes. Actually, when we started in Montreal, it was me and Mike Florian. We were interested into that. He more on the equilibrium part, me more on the network design part and stuff like that. And we were interested because we had those big problems where you have a lot of, and you can decompose and you can do a lot of things. And it was like, oh, if I can decompose, then I can gain time. And then the industry was moving, and it was very interesting because you had like two words in there. One was a high power one, which was Wall Street, the Pentagon, and the guys who are actually doing weather forecasts, and they had those big machines, the central memories, HPs, and the connection machine, and the CDC Express 10,000, something like that, which we ended up by having one. Mm-hmm. And at the other end, there were the little parallel on a board. So 4 chips on a board that you put on something which was a desk computer at the generation 18. So obviously at the time, at the beginning, it was very difficult to say that you buy a big machine in Montreal. I mean, there was one in the Environnement Canada, the ones who are doing the weather forecast, and they were close to the airport. So we started with those blades into the desk computer, and hard to buy in Montreal. So me and Mike sent 2 very young master students, Ismail Chabini and Bernard Gendron, to Cambridge, close to MIT. They both ended to MIT later on. Mm-hmm. To buy those and bring them back in their car. I'm not sure how legal it was as importing stuff was. So we created a little lab in the CRT, putting blades in a computer, and we put too many blades that actually it was overheating. So we took the case out, put the fans to cool it down, and this is how we started. Message passing, fundamentally, where we were not doing, or they were doing on the big ones, where you decompose a problem into very small pieces, like the guys in MIT, like the Denios and the Vladimiru and the others were doing, but actually working on more chunkier decomposition, which are more natural for our type of problems. And then you move and the computers improve, and then I became the director about that time. We started to create those groups of university research centers. We did a lot of stuff on intelligent markets, but then the main thrust was to build that high power computing, which were needed by the mathematicians, the physicists, applied physicists, and the meteorologists. So we bought those, and actually the machines came at late 99. I finished my directorship on the end of the academic year, so on the 31 of May 99. Mm-hmm. Michel took over as director. The machines, of course, came when my Michel was director towards the end of the 99. So they organized me bye thank you party, something like that.
Farewell party.
Gift, which is that huge CDC 10,000 machine, which was up in a controlled room, and they put a ribbon around it, and a red ribbon, and it was very touchy and very, very, very nice. And well, everything else is history after that.
Right. My first paper in the International OR journal appeared in CNOR, and it was a parallel algorithm for the VRP with simultaneous pickup and delivery. And I remember I was doing a course on parallel computing with Professor Lúcia Drummond. She's actually the wife of Eduardo Shoa. Yeah, and then she mentioned specifically your name. Then you should look at his papers. There's this guy Crainic from Canada. He's doing a lot on parallel computing and parallel algorithms for optimization and so on. And that's where I first heard of your name, and I came across your work. And I mean, you're talking about four cores, four processors. And at that time, we are already doing experiments with 256 cores. So to see how things evolved over time, and
it took a while. I mean, what we did is actually when we had that CDC 10,000 machine, it was 64 cores.
Wow.
But those are machines with 64 bits long words as well.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and at the time, as I was saying, at the time we started to build the network. So in another university, they put together the cluster of what the type of machine that you are talking about.
Yeah.
So then when we started to code here and execute somewhere else, which we still do, actually. I mean, not me, actually, the students do nowadays. But
remotely you can access.
This is how a lot of things started. I told you that 2 young master students went to Cambridge to bring the blades back. Now, Ismail was Mike's PhD student, and actually after that he went to be a professor in MIT, and Bernard was became my PhD student after that. And yes, he went to do a postdoc in MIT and come back and be a professor in University of Montreal right now. So, a lot of the work that I did on parallel computing on exact methods, I did with Bernard.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, I did a lot of work on meta-heuristic, parallel meta-heuristic, and behavioral parallel algorithms, and a little bit of emergent computing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of that work.
Learning in parallel computing,
you were also involved together with other colleagues with the creation of 2 important conferences, TRISTAN and Odysseus. Tell me about their story.
Well, we were participating in meetings, and we meaning about the people who are in the community about my age nowadays, and we're meeting and we're talking, and we were dissatisfied with the fact that the presentations were short, more or less droning in a very big, ORSA Teams, that was before Informs, or iForce conference or stuff like that. And then we started dreaming of having a conference for us. And there was the example of Isolde on the
location analysis,
on the location part.
Yeah.
And then we started to talk about creating a similar conference for transportation. I said it has to be called TRISTAN. And when I'm saying us, there was a group more or less floating, but it was, me, I was there, Michel was around, Warren Powell, Hani Mahmasani was there, Martin Labbé was in there, Marius Solomon was around. So not all the people all the time, but we are talking about that. And then we met at one of the French conferences. They know how to organize social dinners. And it was at the end of the social dinner, I remember, at the Lutetia Hotel in Paris. And we had a couple of bottles of champagne, and they were around the table. And I think I still have the menu, and we wrote on that. And we say, the conference will be called TRISTAN. And it will be on freight transportation and logistics. Okay, now, what exactly TRISTAN means? Okay, you know what the conference, the scope, and you know the name. And then we played of it, and I still have it somewhere. And so this is how Triennial Conference on Network Analysis came out, and TRISTAN, and of network, something like that. Mm-hmm. And this is how it went. And we wanted to have it. We also knew, because we had many other conferences, smaller ones, that if you do it too often, you lose. You lose bringing something new, a new contribution. And the goal was, it still is, to talk about the latest research and to have a forum, an agora in the Greek sense of the term, to meet, to exchange, to challenge and to be challenged, to create new shake hands and
bonds
and teams and groups and to do it in a nice place, in a sense. So this is what Tristan was.
What about Odysseus?
And yeah, well, Odysseus came after 3 Tristans, when we realized that Tristan is very successful. And it's so successful that we had to put a cap on how big it becomes, and the cap is still there, no more than 3 parallel sessions. But Tristan is all transportation. So then at one point, we were talking, said, but we do so much work in freight transportation. Why don't we organize something smaller at the beginning on freight? And so we were talking with some German colleagues, and they had and say, let's organize something. We were not thinking about something long term. So let's organize one for freight. And we did it in Chania and Crete. And when we were there, and I think that Martin was there at one point. I remember being in the water at lunchtime, because it was Greece, so the water was great, and looking upward, and we said, why don't we do that a little bit more often, but not too often. So again, the 3 years came, and not the same year as Isolde, and not the same year as Tristan. And we say, so let's having move a little bit less, so let's stay around the Mediterranean, and we are transportation, we move. Well, Odysseus was moving, and he moved for a long time. He was searching and finding all kinds of stuff. So this is how Odysseus talk, and we are moving around in a very large Odyssean, Homeric, if you want, space.
Yeah,
from Atlantic to the Black Sea.
Yeah, I'm even part of the committee of Odysseus now for the second time, and it's a very interesting conference.
And the one in Algiers, in Tangier, will be very interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting that you never worked on routing until the late 90s. Yeah. What made you change your mind?
Yeah. Well, there are so many very good people who are working on routing everywhere, and including, we had a number of very, very, very good ones in Montreal. Just Michel and Gilbert, to mention only 2, there were others. So my opinion was, what the heck, another VRP guy in Montreal, come on. But then I started working on city logistics. And then this came naturally, because in city logistics, you have part of the system and modeling, which goes the service network design way, but there are also a very important part, which is actually last mile delivery, first mile pickup, and everything in between. And with my Italian friends and colleagues with whom I started working on that, even the first models had the routing inside. But it was a different type of routing, in a sense, still routing, mind you. But by looking at our problem, we already from the beginning had origin, destination, demand. So it was not products that we can substitute. We had time dependencies, we had multi-tours, we had synchronization in there. So multi-commodities also in type of product, multi-product, multi-commodity, okay. So several fleets. So all of a sudden you realize that you have to push in different ways, and actually say, oh, but I can have clearly several levels, tiers, echelons, call them whatever you like to call them. So this is how I came to work on that. And working on that, well, you start pushing in the parallel, in the meta-heuristic, then you have the parallel optimization for those, and the work on so that work on integrative search, and this is how Thibaut Vidal came to do a PhD thesis on vehicular routing with me and Michel and Christian Prince.
Yeah.
Now I am working on VRP, on special cases of VRP, but
you mentioned the name of two great researchers that you co-supervised, Bernard Gendron and Thibaut Vidal. Thibaut Vidal is a great friend of mine. He was even here as a guest. What makes them different? Did they challenge you? And also, talking about students, what do you usually do when you think you're not extracting the best from an average student?
Some people will say I'm bad. Okay. Okay, two things here. Any student who gets at the graduate level, unless he or she bought his way inside, which I don't believe it happens, especially at the PhD level, once you pass the exams and everything. And at some point, most of them are good. Now, some of them are exceptionally good. Some of them, maybe the exams were the last and they reached that level of maximum level, but you do have a few, but you do have a few exceptional ones. The exceptional ones, you notice them quite early because they have a capability of integration and synthesis. They have a capability of out-of-the-box thinking. And yes, once you point to them that this is not the right way to do it, they never repeat the error. They learn very fast, which means that normally by the half of the second paper, they should be before me, and I'm running after. I'm still guiding, I'm still giving, but I'm learning from them as much as they learn from me. Okay.
Which I believe were the case of Thibaut and Bernard.
That happened. And by the way, you know, a good PhD thesis is 3 papers. Bernard, I think they had both of them. They have, I don't know, between 6 and 8. I don't even remember how many.
Yeah.
Because they create. Obviously, the more programming you need to do, the less you can do because it takes time. But they create. So it's also, but it's a quality and producing. I think that some colleagues they get very good, but never an exceptional. I'm exceptionally lucky. I had 2 exceptional ones, and many very good ones. But I have those 2 exceptional ones. And sorry for the other ones. I don't want to insult anybody, but I had pleasure with all my students, even the ones with which I fought at some point. Because yes, you do fight at one point.
Really?
Well, yes, because you have to challenge them, and you expect at one point that they challenge you, and you have to fight even culturally at one point.
Oh.
Okay, I'm born in Romania, so half trained in Romania, a little, well, I don't know, quarter in Romania. Otherwise, I'm North American. Okay, where we are. With our students, we come from here, you discuss. Of course, respect has to be there, both ways, clearly. But you expect them to kind of, okay, you teach them, they bring back, maybe more or less rapidly, and you expect to have a dialogue. Research is about dialogue. If I'm not dialoguing, if I'm not exchanging with my student, I'm hiring a professional. That's a big difference. Now, in some cultures, the young are brought up, and in school, they never question. You don't question your professor.
Yeah, they're trained to follow rules.
And not to say no. You know, I was joking with my Well, she left on last Sunday. She's Chinese. She went back to China after being a postdoc, and we were joking because we had a beautiful time that last year. And I told her, now you did 3.5 years in Holland for a PhD. You did 1 year and something here with us. You go back to China. You will have to learn to say no again. She started laughing because, you know, and you get students from Iran, you get students from China. They are very good, but they will never challenge you. And in the beginning, before you learn that you have to do things, you are saying, okay, this is why this is not good. This is something, a work that you have to do is the first exam. It's a synthesis. This is why it's not good. This is good, but this is not good. So normally you expect to get a second version improved. No, they threw everything to the garbage can and wrote something new. Okay, so we had to learn, and again I'm saying we because I'm not alone, to learn how to go over that. So at one point you ask, how do you go? And you have to tell them, and in a sense, my way, I'm telling them exactly how I feel. And if I don't feel good, if I don't feel that we have a good understanding, that we don't exchange well, I'm very open with that.
Oh, okay.
This is how I am. This is how I act. Here it goes, here it doesn't. I think that you could do more. I know that you could. I know that you could do more. On the other hand, we are not. I mean, this is not a poor life marriage. We're not obliged to go to the end.
Sometimes they're just too respectful, and
yeah. So let's can we work? And eventually, yes, most of the time, things go well.
So happy ending. It's the usual
happy
outcome.
Almost all the time. I mean, there have been 1 or 2 cases where the endings were not happy, but most of the time there are happy endings.
Right. So let's talk about the future. I know you've done a lot of work in the last 2 decades in routing and transportation logistics and so on.
Yeah.
But thinking about the future, you told me you sympathize with the idea of digital intelligence. Can you elaborate more on this topic?
Yes. Well, there is a lot of talk. I mean, even informs, we went from OR to analytics, which is already actually taking stock of the fact that it's not only optimization in there, that there is also understanding and the data, and and then we talk about data science, and then we talk about artificial intelligence, and then we talk about Industry 4.0 and smart city as integration. And now in our field, I mean, and I'm talking with people in computer science and engineering, and in our groups here, because we are in those groups. And yes, they are core knowledge, and there is things that you have OR in an artificial network, and you might take an artificial network and use it in a decision support system. And so what I believe, and actually I'm not the only one, I talk around and I see people in even that the numerical, the intelligence, actually you have to understand the problem, and you have to understand the data and the behavior. And that from that you have to predict. The predictive part is understanding the predictive, and then is the normative. And you should not only you should not have any walls in there, but there is a continuum. And you have even, so now we can talk statistics, or we can talk deep learning, machine, or and then it can be used in different parts. And then when you apply something, maybe this is what is most important. That actually, long distance medical diagnosis, you don't optimize anything. I mean, don't optimize your diagnosis. You observe, and then from what you learn, you have to take out and tell something. But you optimize a schedule. You optimize a network. The learning is important, and the learning and the data and the predictions. If you have scrappy predictions, you will have scrappy optimization. But there is this continuum, and I think that more and more our students, as the students who are doing more management or more engineering or more computer science, they should be aware of what is left, right, front, and back, because they will need to work together, and nobody will learn everything. I mean, there is just too much. But at least be aware of what it can bring you. Be aware of what you have, like maybe now an envelope. Push on it. This is how you get breakthrough. But there is somewhere, and there is the other guy or lady at the other end. So yeah, I believe in that, and moving towards more automation of a number of things, which needs all that.
Right.
You know, I mean, we build a telecom network. Most of the messages move by themselves in there. Okay. Not yet in most other things. So yes.
Yeah, you also told me that, in your opinion, modeling is still a key component when it comes to problem solving.
Oh yes. I mean, problem solving means that you need to have a problem. So either somebody gives you a problem, this is what we did in primary school, or you have to actually build it. That's modeling. Well, it's everything that we just said, from the problem environment, problem setting, understanding that, talking with the appropriate people, the data, the transformation, the behavior, and then what exactly is the problem? Because, you know, everything is in everything, and, you know, the butterfly here and okay. So, but never, I mean, the builder, the mother of all models, forget about that. So what is the problem? Big, small, but define it. And then you want to solve, well, we are mathematicians here. We build a mathematical object. It might be on a computer if you do simulation. It's in, anyway, it will end up in a computer if you want to solve anything. But so modeling, it's important. And it's important as a link between the world and the algorithm. And we have to understand that, and to be open-minded when we write the models. Don't write a model to fit your preferred solution method. Write the best model you could for the problem. You'll have biases anyway, so they will be in there anyway. So even your bias will move toward that. But try not to do it explicitly, and then look at it and decide what will be best. And if your hammer is not the best, well, reach out to a colleague and have two hammers on the problem.
Right. Well, Theo, that was a great conversation. I wish we could go on for hours, but we had to stop at some point. So it was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. It has been great.
Thank you very much for doing. As I said, I don't know what each of us brings, but eventually I hope that all of us, in a sense, brings a little bit of a memory of the profession and image of the profession, and maybe it attracts some young ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
On us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let's keep in touch. I hope you can visit us at some point here. And
I do hope. Yes, I want to go back to Brazil.
Yeah, you're most welcome, for sure. Okay, then. So take care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, too. Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.